Welcome back to another episode of the Let's Chat Derbyshire podcast, a podcast where we talk about mental health, suicide prevention and neurodiversity. I'm Luke and I work in the Derbyshire's Public Health, Mental Health and Suicide Prevention team. We hope you're doing well, and today we're lucky enough to be joined by Wukash, and we're going to be talking about culture, belonging, and then also touch on LGBTQ plus communities between those sort of cultural boundaries. If you're not already, do like and subscribe to the podcast, drop us a comment and review the episode if you're listening on Spotify. Just before you introduce yourself, we like to just ask our guests how they're doing out of 10, just to check in. So yeah, if you wouldn't mind, how are you doing today?
Better than this morning, especially as we've met.
Yeah.
So I think there's something about connecting with other people.
Definitely.
I'd say 8 out of 10.
That's solid. That is good. I like that. Yeah, that's why I like doing these episodes in person, because you get that connection and and 9 times out of 10 there's always so much of a conversation that happens outside the actual recording, which I always wish I record, but I always turn it off too soon. So
well, next time have your phone with
you
and just press that
definitely. Thank you just for sharing that. And like I said, we're going to be just talking about culture and sort of belonging, and then a bit around LGBTQ communities and the effect of that. So before we started recording, you spoke about coming over to study from Poland in the UK. If you don't mind just talking a bit about your experience of being born in Poland, coming over, the sort of background,
absolutely,
to who you are for today.
Absolutely, and I suppose what does qualify me to talk about it. I think some listeners might be thinking. And so I'm originally from Poland. I grew up in a little village community in southern Poland, and lived there all my teenage years. Until I was 19, and I moved over here. The plan was to come over for 3 years to study. And it's a long 3 years, because 18 years down the line I'm still here. So I've moved to Derby in 2006. And never looked back. It's almost like found my second home. People often ask me, especially if you grew up in a different place and outside of the UK, where is your home? And I always say home is where the heart is. I feel still got my family and home. Family and brothers back in Poland, but I also have my community, I'll call it, so friends and place in my heart. That's in Derbyshire.
That's lovely. That's so nice that you've got, I guess, 2 first homes, really, haven't you? Really, in both areas. When you came over, English was your second language. How was that for you? I guess coming to a new country.
Confusing when somebody calls you a duck. That's taking me a little while. Long story short, I was taking my first uni bus to the campus, and when the driver I said to me, "You're right, ducky," and then
excuse me,
wasn't in my textbook. There's a distinctive difference between the language that you were taught at school, and when you actually experience or exposed to the actual language that the community speaks, with all the variations, all the dialects, and so on and so forth. So that's that can be a barrier for some, and it is a barrier for a lot of people from the newly arriving communities who come over, and maybe their grasp of English is not on that sort of level when they can communicate easily and freely, and that can create potential barriers in participating in life.
Did you find it isolated at all, or lonely, coming over, or because it was, I guess, to study, you sort of, I think students are forced into communities, aren't they, with like where you live in and stuff, or how was that experience?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think because you are forced into a community of students.
Yeah.
Yes, you look for similarities in that student community.
Yeah.
So you look out for people you like hanging out with, and it's interesting how you sort of go towards the people from the same community.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
remember within the first couple of weeks there was a group of 4 or 5 Polish students that I've met, and we sort of
that's great.
developed those friendships, and that's because there's that culture understanding, that unwritten rule. Oh, we have the same or similar background.
Yeah.
Although 4 or 5 of us completely different, but that tends to you tend to go towards where you feel comfortable and you feel that there's that safe space when you can be yourself.
Yeah.
It's interesting, and maybe because the longer I was here, the longer I was away from my sort of immediate family, and that sort of started affecting me about probably 3-4 years into living in the UK, to the point when I was forget it, what I'm doing here. I'll so there was something missing there. At the time, or sort of dealt with it, and perhaps spent more time connecting with your family and trying to find that missing puzzle.
Yeah, I guess it must have been hard, even I guess when students go to uni within the UK, it's not that far, but it's still hard. But for you, it is a completely new country. When missing your family and stuff, how did it mentally affect you? And how did you get the, I guess, boost to reach out to find those connections when it did get hard? Because at first I could imagine you're all excited and stuff, but like you said, 3 or 4 years in, it's a long time, isn't it?
It is. Through talking to people and opening up, interestingly, I know that's perhaps very very simple advice, and one could say, well, easy for you to say, but that's what somewhere in me I found myself. I need to talk to people. I need to talk to people I can trust. And people that can understand me. Some that from the community I was from the Polish community. But also from people that I perhaps saw as mentors.
That's nice.
People I could think, they've been around a little bit longer than I have. I'm sure there is an answer there, and they can give me their perspective or their share their wisdom, how to deal with those sort of emotions of almost being alone. And you can be lonely even when you're busy and you've got people around you.
How was it? I don't know. I know this would be just assuming it, but through some of more of the hard times and stuff, I don't know what challenges you may have faced and stuff, but how did you get through them? And maybe what were the challenges? I guess throughout your whole life.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because I remember one particular moment when I lost a very close friend.
Yeah,
and it affected me in a way that it's one of those, you meet some people and you don't see them for half of your life, or you see them very occasionally, especially if you live in a part of the globe. And you might see them every year, every 2-3 years, but that particular person passed away, and that their death affected me to the point where I started doubting about what's the purpose of life, honestly. And again, I've struggled with that for a long for a long time.
Yeah.
And initially not even spoken to a lot of people about it. And maybe I was missing closure. I've not had that last conversation with that person I could have had, or I've not said thank you to them because I felt that one of the was a great supporter of me studying in the UK, and I think who knows, if it wasn't for that person, I would be I had this opportunity and privilege to study where I was studying, and even sitting where I'm sitting now and talking to you today. So that's something I think I had to digest, and it's taking a long time. But in terms of how I sort of dealt with it personally, I've always been I loved sport and being active, and I sort of somehow found that sort of connection between body and mind, and that helped me to to deal or channel some of those emotions, and
that's really interesting.
And then eventually, have some of the conversations with myself. Sometimes the only conversation you can have is is with yourself, and it needs to be kind. We sometimes that internal dialogue can be very different depending on what's going on within our lives, and I think if I can say anything, let's be kind to ourselves in that internal conversation.
Yeah, and I think time's important as well, isn't it? It took a long time to process it and stuff, and that's fine. I think you can't always fix things straight away, can you? And it's about finding, like you did, ways to manage those feelings in a positive way to be able to provide the time to then deal with it.
And the other thing with that is that for me was again finding my community over here. Now we talked about a student community, but that was only for 3 years, and then some friendships stay, some people moved move back, move away, move to other countries. So you start building your family, a mix of the Polish community and linking with the sort of, I'd say, established structures. That sounds very boring. But I'm talking about the Polish community has been around Derby and Derbyshire for a few decades. We're going back to the First World War, but then especially Second World War, where a lot of people settled here as refugees. So that and then through different things and jobs as well, and projects I've done throughout my life. You meet people, and you consider friends, and you're lucky that they consider you friends, and that's another aspect of building that community.
Yeah, how do you think your culture's influenced who you are as a person now? Do I'm sure you still carry it with you, don't you, and stuff like that.
Certainly has, and I suppose when we talk about culture, we talk about a set of values, set of beliefs, behaviors, and very simplifying, the definition of culture. And again, you're talking about culture within culture. So I could talk about Polish culture and being growing up in a small community where the religion and had a big influence, because Poland at the time, and still is, it's majority Catholic, Christian Catholics, and you almost sort of are thrown into that community. like using the example of you use earlier, I was running the student community. When you grow up and then your parents make that decision for you to be part of that sort of community, and I grew up in Christian faith, and that's as you grow, you perhaps more adult-like. I'd like to think I am to some extent. You start making your own decision, and you start seeing barriers that sometimes religion can put on people.
No.
And that's without, I'm generalizing here.
Oh yeah, no, definitely, yeah. You mentioned earlier about your brother. He's gay. He's still in Poland.
Yes, yeah.
But how do you think it's been for him from your perspective as being his brother? Has there been any hardships and stuff and I think that you've noticed while you were there?
When I talked about those barriers in terms of the religion, I think that was one of them I was referring to, because I think we have a long way to go in Poland in terms of the LGBTQ plus community. I think enjoying the same freedoms like other people do, and one perhaps would ask for a comparison between the UK and Poland. Again, perhaps from lived experience, I'm not qualified to make that that comparison. I can just talk about it from my own perspective, and I feel and believe that it's also more welcoming for the LGBTQ plus community comparing to Poland. Not looking far out to 2020, what we're talking 4 years ago, the previous government introduced LGBT free zones, and that was adopted by about a third of local administrations in Poland.
Wow.
So fortunately, not every local administration said, "Oh, we'll do that." Because just to clarify, LGBT-free zones, that doesn't mean that you're free to be LGBT. That was quite opposite. It was free from the LGBT plus community. So that was almost like a directive from the government. And those local authorities who signed up to them say, you're not welcomed here. So again, imagine that, and imagine if you are part of that community. Straight away, that's a huge, huge barrier.
Massive barrier.
And for my brother, when he came out, and he came out in his early 20s, he felt fine. He felt comfortable in his community, in place where we live, and lives until now. And actually, with my parents, we were more concerned how he's gonna be seen, and how that can affect his life, potentially his career as well. And
do you notice any, I guess, times where he may have not been safe, or was there any times where you were worried as well for him at all, or were concerned that he maybe should come move over with you and stuff, or
fortunately not, and touch wood, it's gonna stay that way, but again, it's not uncommon that people are targeted for their sexuality in Poland. If I may just perhaps give an example of a positive. I talked about the LGBT free zones in February this year. The current government
abolished them.
Them. So the last local authority was abolished in February this year.
So it sounds like there's those there's those positive steps for people, at least, maybe, it sounds really challenging for people to become part of a community. Actually, like you said earlier, it just sometimes naturally happens. Is there anything you found that helped you, find your community here, and help you get you through some maybe of those challenging times? Or was it just, it naturally happened?
Well, yes and no, because it would depend. If we are talking about the Polish community, and especially being an outsider at the very early doors when I came here, that's where you're a bit more apprehensive, I suppose, and you're more careful, and that's why you're more likely to oscillate towards your community. And what I mean by that, the community that you maybe are part of, and so those early days, I was more involved with the Polish community that I am now, and again that's just a bit of a transition. My journey, how I sort of felt that need early days, but I don't feel that need is there now. You start realizing perhaps the best community that you may have is the best 5 friends that you have, and that's your community.
That's really nice. Do you think at the start it was a bit of a comfort to have your, the Polish community there? Was it like a home from home sort of thing at the start, and then certainly, as your confidence grew, you felt like you could reach out more?
They didn't call me a duck or anything like that. The language, perhaps at the time I was still sort of more of a practicing as a Christian as well. So again, there was those trying to maintain some of those traditions.
Okay.
That certainly helped me.
That's really interesting.
Doors,
were there, I guess, any barriers you had to overcome, or anything that you remember thinking this, what is going on?
Speaking, I must say, again, especially with English is not your first language, and I could just about communicate enough to get by. But that's things like we're doing here today. I would be petrified, honestly.
That's great.
So I think that's one of the first barriers is for some is the language barrier, and having confidence to speak, and then with that, imagine if you don't have that confidence to speak, then you how can you access your local services, including mental health services and suicide prevention services. And I know that we've done a great strides towards providing support for people whose English is not their first language, but when we talk about the stigma around mental health, again, that's something that a few years ago, I mean, especially I was growing up, you never talked about it, you never mentioned it. And,
what's the this you might not know, what is the stigma like in Poland around the topic of mental health and stuff? Is it an open topic, or is it quite sheltered still?
I think it's quite sheltered. But again, I'm just talking from my own observation. It was slightly different for our family, because my mother was diagnosed with depression, and that and perhaps that we when you experience it,
more open,
and you're more you're more open, you're more understanding, and you are learning through experience of other people, and in this case it was a family member. So,
that's really interesting.
I was still quite young. I think I was 12, 13.
That must have been really hard then.
Happened.
Yeah, must have been. How did it affect you? I guess when things like that happen in the family, there's always a knock on and stuff. Did you understand what was happening, or it must have been
that's a good
deep,
I
isn't
think
it?
the first person who asked me that question. So that's a deep question. I was trying to understand, and I remember at the time I was going to a library and finding out books to because you perhaps can we even as as a teenager can we talk about it? Is it okay to ask even your mum about it? And I was just after school going to the library and looking looking through books on the subject. I remember doing that. So
that must have been really hard. I guess you must have felt a weight on your shoulder to have that responsibility of to take the step to start researching it and stuff. Must have been really heavy.
Yeah, probably. I suppose at the time you don't think about it in those categories. You want to help.
Yeah.
That was the reason I was thinking, how can I help? That was.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like you said, having these open conversations really helps, I think, and make people understand, and hopefully people listening to this will help them realise that you can have those open conversations and support each other.
And not being afraid to ask. I think that's what often happens. Am I okay to ask this? And am I okay to ask that? Well, it depends. What's the intention? What's the context? And if you wouldn't ask, your grandma or your grandfather that same question, maybe you shouldn't be asking the question.
No, definitely. What do you think people can do then to support more inclusivity around multicultural society, stuff like that? What can people do to be more inclusive and supportive? Is there anything, I guess, through your experience of living here, you would have appreciated probably from people over your time?
I mean, I always say, if you can be anything, be kind. And I think there's, if I could ask for, people to be more with kind and kindness, it comes a lot, it comes understanding, it comes the fact that you are, if you don't understand, you are willing to learn and to understand, you are advocating, but you can only advocate for other people if you know their journeys and what they're going through, and that might not be individuals, that might be the community, and understanding the community, and that might be part of your work and of your role. It might be part of you and as an individual and want to give something back. So that aspect of learning to advocate.
So just before we finish, is there any, I guess, last bits of advice or just anything you'd like to, let the listeners know, really, whether it is about, supporting culture or, your experience? I don't know if there's, for anyone who may be struggling or people know someone struggling.
I suppose when we support people, or equally when we are with people and we deal with people. Let's remember that everyone, and it's a quote I remember, and I always carry with me. Everyone is fighting their own battle, and I think that's why the best we can do is to ask if it feels right and appropriate to ask how we can support other people. Might come signposting to specific services. Community-led services, and I know you'll be sharing some of the links to local community groups, grassroots community groups who know the needs of the communities better than we do very often.
Definitely.
Be kind.
Be kind. No, thank you. That's lovely. And we will be sharing links to some of the community groups across Derbyshire. So if people do want to find out what's local to them, they can do. So yeah, thank you everyone for listening. You've been listening to the Let's Chat Derbyshire podcast. If you're not already, do like and subscribe. Follow us on social media, and like I said, do check the description below for any links on support locally across Derby and Derbyshire. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.